All right, take a look at what's happening with the major market averages from the Dow, the S&P 500, and NASDAQ. A hat trick of the new records right now. The question is whether they hold on for the next 3 hours before markets close at 4 p.m. Eastern time. The Dow is getting a disproportionate attention here because it was very, very close to hitting 29,000 for a while, within about 29 points of 29,000. That would be one of its quicker leaps from a 1,000-point milestone, if you will, last achieved on November 15th of last year. So this would be about 36 days after that. We do the math for you. It's basic cable. You're welcome, America. All right, meanwhile, let's bring in the Wall Street Journal chief economic commentator, a great writer in his own right, Greg Ip. We've got Axios Markets editor, Dan Rabowen. We've got American Institute for Economic Research president, Edward Stringham. And last but not least, the New York Post editorial board member, Kelly Jane Torrance. Welcome to all. Greg, if I can focus on you up top here and get your sense of what is kind of driving this environment right now. What do you think?
I think a lot of the things that we worried about a year ago, we worried about trade tensions, we worried about geopolitical risk, those things have basically kind of faded. I mean, we're soon going to have a phase one deal signed between China and the United States. And so you don't really need trade uncertainty to go away. You just need it to stop getting worse, and I think that's what you're essentially seeing. And I think the other factor that's important is you have a Fed that's very comfortably on the sidelines. This morning, Richard Clarida, the vice chairman of the Federal Reserve, said the economy was in a good place, monetary policy was in a good place. If anything, he thought there might be downside risks to inflation. So it doesn't sound like the market's got anything to worry about the Fed going in here. So a year of good growth. Perhaps the only thing that I think the market needs to worry about is whether it's getting a bit ahead of itself valuation-wise.
You know, when you talk to a lot of the market experts, they all get a little worried that these levels are nosebleed or whatever. Depending on the earnings, of course, and where they go, you could make a good case that they come in as strong as some suspect. This is still a very affordable market. What do people tell you?
So it all comes down to interest rates, Neil. Essentially, this is an expensive market, except relative to all the other things you could be buying. So bonds, in terms of yields, are extremely low. So if you make an adjustment for that, the expected return on equities is kind of in its long-term historical average. I think what you do worry a little bit about is some of the leadership issues. There's just a heck of a lot of this market that's based on a handful of very big technology companies. That's never a positive thing. And, you kind of get this sort of like feeling that it's Tina. There is no alternative, right? And that you just need perhaps a little bit of like implosion of some of those excess valuation situations to force some form of revaluation.
You know, Dan, looking at all of this, obviously Iran, and I'll raise this to all of you, it could have gone very, very differently. Is it, you guys sense right now that the fact that it didn't is what's really propelling it?
I don't think so. I mean, had World War III taken off, or had Iran launched an attack here inside the U.S. or something like that, sure, certainly that could have gone differently. But as Greg just pointed out, Tina, there is no alternative. You buy the stocks, you buy the dip. You had a couple-point dip coming off of this Iran scandal, and I think a lot of folks just said, hey, you know what, time to buy, log in there, get those algos going, and the market just keeps going up.
All right, talking about algorithms, the lifeblood of this market. Kelly Jane, when you talk to a lot of individual investors, they worry that, it's too late for me to get in. Now, you could have said that 1,000 points ago, which is a month ago. You could have said that, at each and every millennial jump here, and the market still keeps going. So what's that individual mindset right now?
Exactly. And I think, every time, I think more and more people start thinking, hey, why didn't I get on board earlier? So you're going to hear that question from new people each time I think the market goes up. But yeah, I mean, it's going up. There's, you have to get in at some point. And yeah, there's always a risk whenever you get in. You don't know if it's going to keep going up. But, the market does not like uncertainty. And I think that's why it dipped when the Iran tensions escalated. We don't know for sure what's going to happen now, but it certainly looks like things have really cooled down and are going to stay cooled down at least for a while. And I think the markets love that.
Aren't we right back to where we were a little bit more than a week ago, though, when it comes to Iran and the Middle East and all of that? I mean,
I think war is tremendously disruptive to the global economy.
Write that down.
And the fact that we're not going to be getting into a major war, I think, is actually showing up in positive prices. People, I mean, just a week ago, I was like, oh my goodness, we're going to waste another, trillions and trillions more dollars on this new conflict. And And if that gets de-escalated, it's going to let Americans spend money on business activity rather than wasting it on these very costly wars.
Greg, before you go, I did want to get your thoughts. You know, many were focusing on what the president had to say about this Iranian plane crash and that it wasn't and didn't look mechanical to him. But it was in the context of talking about another assault on cutting back on rules and regulations that could speed up, for example, big infrastructure projects on, you know, highways and bridges. And I've always argued, I know you and I have gotten into this before, that long before the tax cuts took effect, these moves early on to cut regulations were immediate. Now, there are critics who say you go too far on the environmental front, they're dangerous, but for many businesses, those were instant savings, weren't they?
Yeah, I think that actually the regulatory environment is probably more important in some ways than the tax environment and the trade environment in terms of determining the sort of the freedom to maneuver for a lot of businesses. Now, that all said, what the president's just announced with respect to infrastructure, these projects have always had very long lead times, and that will continue to be the case even under an accelerated approval schedule that they're sort of talking about. So I don't see that as a game changer in any regard. I think the real lesson of the last week, thinking about the geopolitical risk, is that this is not your father's oil market. I mean, this is not a situation where you're talking about, like, let's say we embargoed Iran further. I mean, their exports are already down so far that there's not a significant presence in the oil market. I mean, if a missile strike on Saudi's largest refining complex can't send the price of oil up substantially for more than a week or two, then a few sort of exchanges of missiles like we've just seen will not either. And it speaks to the huge game changer the presence of the United States and shale oil is in this market. So the lesson I take from the last week is that there's an extraordinary degree of resilience to these markets, to geopolitical shocks, partly because of structural changes like in the oil market.
Yeah, it helps to be in a position economically that we can weather these blows, because something like this that would have happened, you know, back in the 70s, we know a very different reaction. Greg, always fun. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, now for this War Powers Resolution Act that they're trying to get through right now on Capitol Hill. Chuck Grassley was here just a few minutes ago saying this move to limit what the president can do and when, well, it's dangerous. Take a look. So already at least two Republicans, Rand Paul and Mike Lee, likely are. They do think that the president should be reined in here. What do you think?
And if Americans' lives are in danger, and he didn't do what he was doing, and then we had a lot of Americans killed, the very same people condemning him now would condemn him because he didn't take the proper action to protect Americans.
So, Dion, what he's saying, the president's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. What do you say?
Yeah, no. Let's take a look at what actually Senator Lee said. He said that the meeting that he had, where it was explained why they actually took this assassination attempt on the Iranian general, was flimsy. It was limited. They gave very little information, and they skedaddled out of that meeting as if nothing happened. He said this meeting was embarrassing, and they didn't provide nearly enough information, nearly as much as they should.
And that's his opinion, and Rand Paul's. Others who were there, certainly the Republicans, Democrats, to a man or woman, are of that mindset, by the way, but the others say it was very convincing. Grassley among them.
Grassley among them, and absolutely. But look, here's the bottom line. I don't think Lee or Rand Paul or any other Republicans are going to go against the president. Republicans are scared to death to going against President Trump, and I think right now, Mike Lee is popping off. They have made it very clear they're going to vote for this. They've made it very clear, but this isn't going to do anything because they're not going to get any other Republicans on their side.
All right, there is that, Kelly Jane, and the president seems to, in his remarks, accepting it, that these guys they're wrong on this, but they're free to go ahead and vote, you know, for this. But where does this go?
Yeah, you know, Rand Paul, of course, has been off and on whether he supports the president on various issues or not, and he was against the Soleimani strike. Of course,
he's against foreign intervention of any sort.
Yes. Even when apparently American lives are at risk. Yeah, look, I mean, the House is going to vote, obviously. It's a democratically controlled chamber. I don't think the Senate is going to get enough Republicans over, and I think that's a good thing. Why hamstring the president when there are threats coming right now about Iran? And of course, I do think that it's important to talk about what Congress's war powers are and what powers the executive branch has. And I'm glad that Democrats have finally decided to have this after President Obama was in about over half a dozen countries and didn't have a single authorization for the use of military force. He used as his justifications the 2001 September 11th AUMF and the he went on Iraq in 2002, and he went into Pakistan, Libya, Yemen, all using those authorizations. So I'm glad the Democrats have decided to question this now. It's just unfortunate that the only time they question
the timing of it all, because whatever your views on this subject politically, I can see Republicans seizing on this to say they would have a guy like this in their sights and let him walk. That's what they're saying. Right?
I mean, I think it is all political. I mean, 10 years ago, we've got targeted assassinations, including of American citizens, and the Democrats are like, oh, this is great. Of course we should be doing that. Now, at this point, no, we can't do that. So it is their change of tune.
But to be fair, Republicans ripped, President Obama with his line in the sand and the red line stuff, and then you have to consult us. So he goes ahead and says, all right, I'll consult you. You give me the approval.
And Kelly Jane makes a great point about where those authorizations came from. You talk about 2001, 2002. That was George W. Bush in the White House. So this has been a long-standing act by the executive to just kind of go in, bomb who he likes, kind of take acts of war without the authorization of Congress.
So you think that should apply to Democrats?
I think it should apply to Democrats, Republicans. Absolutely, this is supposed to be what Congress does. It's one of their stated functions.
And you shared that view when Barack Obama.
Absolutely. I'm on the record on this.
And that's the thing is that most parties don't do it when their party controls the executive branch. It's only when the other party doesn't. And yeah, both Democrats and Republicans are guilty.
Well, the president made it very clear no matter what they do, he's going to do what he wants to do because he doesn't have time to yap with them about stuff.
That sounds like him, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure I would say time to yap, because he's on Twitter now and then.
He did not say it in so many words. I cut to the chase on that.
Exactly.
But he said time's a wasting, and when you have to make a trigger decision, no pun intended, this is what I decided. We'll have a lot more after this, including a Dow right now that's printing the records, a NASDAQ that's following along, an S&P that's following along. But you know how these guys go. They love those even milestones, and 29,000 is within their sights. More into this. Well, Bud Light is jumping and clawing its way into the hard seltzer field. Grady Timble has more, I guess, with a Super Bowl spin as well. Hey, Grady.
Hey, Neil, what you see here is 2,000 cans of the soon-to-be-released product whizzing by every single minute. And this is Bud Light Hard Seltzer. It's going to be released on Monday. And let's be honest, it's hardly the first hard seltzer on the market. In fact, two other brands had 85% of the hard seltzer market share as of last summer. But as beer drinking declines, Anheuser-Busch InBev sees this as an area where it can grow. In fact, hard seltzer grew 210% from 2018 to 2019, and some analysts say this could be a $2.5 billion industry by next year. So that's why Anheuser-Busch InBev's North America CEO tells me in an exclusive interview they want in this category. Think you can overtake, say, White Claw or Truly with this product?
We want more people into the category. We want the category growing, and we want to make sure that our consumers will have the chance to try Bud Light. And we know that if they try, they will prefer Bud Light, given the quality of the product that we have.
We mentioned beer sales declining in recent years. That's actually not the case for craft beer. That segment is growing, and AB InBev is expanding its footprint there as well. But what the CEO tells me in that interview is he hopes that this becomes a product that some people who enjoy beer but haven't tried hard seltzer will give a go, an untapped market, untapped customer, if you will. Neil?
I see what you did there. All right, thank you very much, my friend. In the meantime, speaking of beer, beer money could get a whole new meaning right now. There's a beer tax to pay for New York public colleges, and it's gaining momentum. At least that's the idea behind it. Back with Deandra Bowen, Edward Stringham, Kelly Jane Torrance. You're shaking your head.
This has got me spitting mad, Neil. I am furious about this. The idea of raising the beer tax, and they're not even going to dedicate it towards, maybe anti-drinking efforts or efforts to keep kids from getting hooked on alcohol. No, they're just going to give it to the SUNY colleges and say, here's some extra money we made from putting more tax on beer for hardworking Americans like myself who just want to enjoy an ice-cold beverage. This is ridiculous, and I won't stand for it.
Wow. All right.
Will
the first
not
tax you're against.
I'll sit for it. I'm against all the taxes. No taxes for anyone ever.
Well, you know what's interesting about this? I think what they're doing is they're raising it. It's around 14 cents now. They want to bring it to 30. They're using a portion of that for this. But I know how this kind of stuff goes. even if you're assuming it's going to make its way to ease college cost pressures, it skips that.
Oh, yeah, doubling taxes on beer and then picking this targeted feel-good industry. Oh, the college kids are going to help out all these kids. This is just opening the door for all sorts of special interests. We're going to tax this industry, give it to Rob Paul, pay Peter. This is just a total disaster. We need to lower the beer tax from 14 cents to 0.
0 cents.
Let's get that wine tax lowered too, though.
Well, that's the idea, right? It would be.
They want to double it and make it what wine tax is.
Which is 30 cents.
And as a wine drinker, not a beer drinker, like quite a few women are, I do think that could be a sexist tax. The wine tax is a little bit higher there. But I mean, New York's one of the most highly taxed states, as I've discovered since moving here last month.
Indeed.
And people, the census figures just came out and showed people are fleeing New York. And I think a lot of it is because of those high taxes. And, he mentioned how the craft beer industry is really booming. It's booming in New York. And if taxes are doubled on it,
well,
this could start moving out.
Well, this could be a warning to a certain royal couple if they ever want to move over here, because the royal family is reportedly seeking a workable solution with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. I'm hearing in this what they are looking at is just relief from being in a pressure cooker and then finding an alternative.
Yeah. What it really is it's time to get paid is what time it is. Meghan Markle she's one of Instagram's biggest stars. She's one of the most followed people in the world, and she can't make any money off of, Kendall Jenner makes $1 million per Instagram post, and she's the least popular Kardashian.
She's not crying poverty.
No, she's not, but it's time to get paid, Neal. And I know they're saying, oh, we want to get out of the pressure cooker. There's so much attention on us. It's time to get paid off of the pressure cooker. And I understand. Look, they want to move here to America, land of opportunity, get this money.
Well, I think
and
she wants to move to Canada.
Yes,
there, right?
my native land, originally from
North
Canada.
American. Sorry, North America is what I meant.
Canada's part of America.
Yeah, if only. But no, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, the royal family has always been about duty and public service. And the Queen, I mean, she was a teenager volunteering during World War.
They didn't run this by the Queen, I'm told.
No, they did not. But it's interesting because as soon as they announced it, they had a huge website up with some questions and answers that clearly took a lot of preparation. And when I read that last night, I actually did think, do they want to be able to make a lot of money off books, speeches, merchandise? Well, today comes the news that they have got a ton of trademarks for Sussex Royals, and that's exactly what they're going to be doing. Keep in mind, Prince Harry, just from Princess Diana alone, inherited $16 million. So it's not like they're starving and they really need the cash. I think, Dion's right.
Well, they could abdicate, right? I mean, we're going back to Edward back before World War II.
Sure, that's right. They're not giving up any official position, but they're giving up the welfare. So time to get off the dole, Harry.
Get off the dole, Harry. And look, Harry's not even in line for the throne anyway. There's really very little downside to this. You move over to Canada, the U.S.
But it seems to me they're calling it what is it, Megxit? Like
Megxit.
Megxit.
She's the one who wanted this. And I guess he figures, happy wife, happy life.
Happy wife,
happy life. That's how it's been. And, he
Smart
reportedly told the Queen when they were doing their wedding preparations, what Meghan wants, Meghan gets. And certainly Britain and...
what was the Queen's reaction? I think not.
Exactly. So it's certainly royally Britain.
I don't see it happening.
You don't see it happening?
I don't.
I see it happening.
The palace released a statement saying it's complicated.
Yeah.
So clearly,
whenever they say
they're putting a brake on it.
It's not complicated.
See, Neal, you say that because I think you don't know enough black women. Meghan Markle said this is happening. It's going on, all right?
Well,
I'm going to tell you that right now.
There's a lot of fighting back and forth. So maybe you're right.
Like I said, I know black